Sekeres and Price for Friday, December 12th, 2025, a special emergency podcast edition. Quinn Hughes traded to the Minnesota Wild. We are a presentation of Bet365. Whatever your bet, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app, get in on the game, use code NATION when doing so. Must be 19 or older. Please play responsibly. Coming to you from the Pacific Toyota Dealer Studio here downtown Vancouver at the Sheraton Wall Center. Joined by a vacationing Blake Price, who makes time out. Thank you, partner. Away from his vacation, our Canucks reporter Jeff Patterson, the host of Rinkwide Vancouver, after an extraordinary trade, an extraordinary evening in Canucks history. Quinn Hughes, their captain, traded to the Minnesota Wild today for 3 players and a first-round draft pick in the 2026 draft. Center Marco Rossi, winger Liam Ogrren, defenseman Zeev Buham, all of them first-round picks in their own right. This is a seminal day and trade for the Vancouver Canucks and this management team of Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin. Gentlemen, good evening. How are we?
Pretty good. You?
I was at a boozy lunch, and it was time to come back to the studio and work, so forgive me. Yeah. Jeff, you sat in for Blake today and did the show. We'll start with you, my man. What's your first impressions of the news you've heard this evening?
It's a really sad day. It's sad that the Quinn Hughes era has come to an end and that it had to come to an end. The organization failed Quinn Hughes. Quinn Hughes in no way failed the Vancouver Canucks. He provided them with some of the best years individually that we have ever seen from a player, and certainly the best defenseman in franchise history. And, we talked about it earlier today, Matt. I am shocked at the timing of it. I thought this would get pushed through the holiday roster freeze. I thought they would still be doing information gathering, but the reports after the game in Buffalo or against Buffalo last night seemed to indicate that things had been pushed along here. And so Quinn Hughes no longer plays for the Minnesota Wild. It's a bold swing by Bill Guerin, who's not afraid to take those kinds of swings. Kirill Kaprizov, Matt Boldy, some of the best goaltending in the National Hockey League. They're in a ridiculous division with Colorado and Dallas, but game on there. They think that they're stepping up into that weight class. And for the Vancouver Canucks, maybe the biggest news of all, beyond the fact that Quinn is no longer part of the organization, the word has been uttered in a press release at the very least, but the rebuild is upon us.
Yes,
Indeed,
but it's also
is
going to be a short rebuild, a quick one, as per the press release. This trade supposedly to facilitate a quick stay at the bottom. And that's where I'll start here, guys, is my review of this trade is profoundly different. If you tell me today, on December the 12th, 2025, that the Vancouver Canucks also get a top 5 draft pick this year, my worry here is, and I think this return is middling for me. I know that Matt in particular is probably more glowing on the return here, but I'll call it middling. But if you tell me they also pick in the top 3 or top 5 this year, my review in this trade gets better. But my worry here is this trade makes them better right now. It does. And if it makes them too good right now, them getting this haul back, which I think is fine, lowercase f fine, and they pick 9th this year, I'm a lot less excited about what's been accomplished over the course of this season for the Vancouver Canucks.
Jeff, take that on, particularly the part about a quick rebuild.
Well, and we're going to hear from Patrick Allvin, who's being put forward to defend or discuss this trade by the organization at the bottom of the hour here. So within half an hour, we'll start to hear from Patrick Allvin. In his own words, in the press release, he talks about the fact that it's a deep draft this year, and it suggests that they are going to hold on to this pick, but we saw it as recently as last January when they made the first move to acquire the pick in the JT Miller trade and then flipped it moments later. And so I hope that there's not another shoe to drop here on this Friday night, but with this organization, you never know. And to Blake's point about this team now all of a sudden getting good, I'm not convinced that can happen. And I know you didn't suggest that they're going to make terrific strides. Look, if nothing else, it means that David Kampf is no longer a top 2 center on this team. So that's good news. We should point out, guys, that Marco Rossi is injured right now and hasn't played a game since November the 11th, but reports out of Minnesota are he's been skating and was a possibility to return this weekend for the Wild. So it sounds like the Canucks are getting a guy that's close to game action. And of course, you know how much work the Canucks had done on the Marco Rossi file in the offseason, and the reports that it was the Canucks that nixed the deal when they were looking at him. So they're familiar, certainly in terms of the homework that they have done on this player, 24 years of age, 60 points last year in the National Hockey League, and not far off a point a game in the 17 games that he's played this season. So this guy can help down the middle without a doubt. They knew that in the summer. They just weren't prepared to meet the asking price. I think the centerpiece, though, has to be Buham, right? I mean, Quinn Hughes out. This is a guy that profiles as, Quinn Hughes light, does a lot of the same sorts of things, approaches and attacks the game. He's not Quinn Hughes, but he's expected to run a first-unit power play for a lot of years in the National Hockey League. And so I think that's the guy that absolutely has to hit. Without a doubt, if this trade is going to work for the Vancouver Canucks, both in the short and the long term, Liam Ogrren is a project. I know he was a first-round pick, 18 games in the NHL this year, not a single point. So of the three, he's young and there's still potential there, but this is not a guy that is absolutely hit in the National Hockey League just yet.
Matt Sekeres with Blake Price and Jeff Patterson. I'm here in the Pacific Toyota dealer studio at the historic Wall Center. Visit shoptoyota.ca or visit your local Pacific Toyota dealer today. I want to read this quote from Jim Rutherford, gentlemen, in the press release, and then we will discuss. With the circumstances surrounding JT and now
loves
Quinn,
to bring it up. Loves to bring up JT.
We are fortunate to acquire these very good young players from Minnesota. They will be a key part of the rebuild that we are currently in, giving us a bright future moving forward. The hockey club will continue to build with talented young players, using that as a blueprint to become a contender sooner rather than later. What in the hell is JT, not even with the last name, doing in this press release, gentlemen? It's crutch at best. Oh, we had to trade JT because he and Petey couldn't get along, and we're going to put him in the press release about Quinn Hughes?
It's because
I'm gobsmacked.
It immediately gives a caveat of it. Before you're quick to criticize what we've done here recently and what we've got in this trade, remember, we were put into a tough position because of JT Miller, and then we were put into a tough position by Quinn Hughes. So if you're going to criticize, just remember there was nothing we could do. That's what this is about.
Well, here, Jeff and I were talking about this on the show today, Blake. They got 11 fucking games out of Filipino and Victor Mancini so far for JT Miller after that trade on January 31st. Blake, Jeff said sad day for the organization because of the departure of Quinn Hughes. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, peak Pavel Bure versus peak Quinn Hughes. Oh, God, that is a Sophie's choice of who was the best player to ever wear a Vancouver Canucks uniform. And that's the level of player that we are talking about. Now, to be fair in that regard, and Jeff, you were in this market at the time, like the Pavel Bure trade was very similar to this. Like, it was fine. Like, it was, I don't know that people saw the Pavel Bure trade and went, oh my God, we're going to be just fine. It was okay, and this one is okay, and you can debate it and you can argue it. But considering these are the two best players to ever, in over 50 years of existence, don the jersey, the fact that I don't know. We're outsiders. The outside media guys is acclaiming this trade more than we are, and maybe that's the difference between us looking at a Matt Duchene trade and looking at an Erik Karlsson trade as the other way around. But I think it is tough to take as a Canucks fan that the two best players in franchise history both traded, and neither gets what we think right now are the Karlsson or Duchene kind of returns.
Well, Jeff, before you jump in, I'll just give them the math. I've done the math. It is 489 games, including the postseason, for Quinn Hughes as a Vancouver Canuck. It is 63 goals. It is 385 assists for 448 points. It is the only Norris Trophy in the history of the Vancouver Canucks. It is one selection to the NHL First Team All-Star, and It is a all-rookie honor. In his rookie year, he made the all-rookie team as well. Sorry, Jeff, go right ahead.
No, we went over Jim Rutherford's remarks, and again, right now all we have to go on in terms of comments, press release statements, but Patrick Alvin says, we're excited to add a solid center in Marco, a good young blue liner in Zeev, and a versatile forward in Liam. And he's not wrong. But none of those guys right now screams game breaker, and so this search for elite level talent continues for the Vancouver Canucks, especially when you've jettisoned a guy that stands alone as the scoring leader and a player that just did things that nobody else has ever done. So, I'll be patient and give these guys that they've acquired an opportunity here. And it does feel like they're trending to picking in the top 5 at the very least. And when you're dead last, hey, maybe it will be higher than that. So that's going to be one way to, you'd think, ascertain elite level talent, but they just need so much more here. And so while Marco Rossi can play, like Marco Rossi and Elias Pettersson, whatever version of Elias Pettersson, if that's 1-2 down the middle, I'm still not sure that that's championship caliber material for the Vancouver Canucks.
Okay, Blake's called it middling, and I've already said on social media that I like it. Now, I will say I liked it more before some texts from scouting friends came in. But here's what I like about it, gentlemen, and feel free to pick this apart. This is the equivalent of 4 first-round picks. I had said to you earlier in the week, Blake, I saw it as a 4-piece deal because 3 pieces, not quite enough, given this player, his level, given no trade protection, given a decent salary, given the marketplace that we were dealing in. And Jeff, I'll harken back to the Sekeres and Price show today where I said, look, we've already got 9 teams on the book who are interested, maybe 5 or 6 that we can discount. It still leaves like 13, 14 teams in the NHL. A gargantuan marketplace, a rare, irregular marketplace. And sure enough, here it comes down with a team that had not been linked to Quinn Hughes previously. When I say first-round picks, it's because all 3 players were, in fact, first-round picks, and there's a 2026 first-rounder attached to this. You'll have to help me, gentlemen, whether or not there's any protection on this pick. I haven't seen that reported just yet. No protection whatsoever, Jeff? Like, no. This pick is free and secure?
I haven't seen it confirmed,
right.
But I haven't seen it reported.
There would be no reason to confirm that. This is a good team. They've got nothing to protect at this point.
Yeah. Marco Rossi fills the second-line center spot. Now, I will say some people believe he is imperfect second-line center. I'll read a text that I got from a pro scout on him saying he's a 2B center. He makes plays and will create secondary offense, but he's no Horvat or Kessler, who were very high-end 1B/2A centers. The reports I got on Buham that he is going to be a power play quarterback. He will replace Quinn Hughes in that role of running the power play, and that he is a top 4 defenseman, although probably not a top pair defenseman. The two-way game isn't quite as strong. On Ogrren, I've got conflicting reports. I got one pro scout who is telling me third-line guy, top end, play recognition, just doesn't project into the top 6, needs to play with more power and to shoot it more. I reached out to our buddy Cam Robinson of Elite Prospects saying, give me your book on Ogrren. He said speed, power, heavy shot, finishes checks, leader, maybe top 6 for sure. Top 9. So they are filling 3 different spots on this hockey team, gentlemen. There is no question that they gave up quality, but I think you can argue that they have added quantity and quality in this deal. And of course, this is now the NHL salary cap world. So you can throw out that old hockey axiom about whoever gets the best player in the trade wins the deal. That wasn't the case with Erik Karlsson. That wasn't the case with Matt Duchene, and you are also plugging these holes at a particularly cheap cost, guys. Rossi is a $5 million second-line center. That is very good value for a second-line center in today's day and age. Buham's making less than $1 million. He's got club control, and will again next year. He's got club control thereafter, and Ogrren is not even making $900,000 with club control thereafter. I know cap space isn't what it used to be because not as many great players get to market these days. And of course, everybody has cap space with the cap escalating as it has over the last 2 years. But I suspected that this was going to be a 3 significant pieces and then maybe a sweetener, a wild card, if you will. I think you can argue they got 4 significant pieces.
They did. They got 4 significant pieces. And while you can make the argument that, the best player in the trade doesn't have to be on your side in order for you to win the trade, I do look for the potential for an elite player. I think certainly, hey, no one's debating a 60-point second-line center for at least one season, and he's on pace for that again this year at his current rate. That's 2A. Like that is a 65-point second-line center. That's elite second-line center. Now, again, it needs to be done more than once for it to be true for Marco Rossi. But until it's happened, it's not happened. And Ziv Buham, the book is out. Cam Robinson tweeted out that he considers Ziv Buham elite.
Yep. Many do, Blake. Many do. Yeah. Like, this is a very talented player on the puck and an offensive driving defenseman. Now, is he going to be able to hold down the defensive minutes that he's going to play in all situations like we saw Quinn ultimately, although Quinn didn't kill penalties? I think that question is out there. And, of course, is he going to be as high end as Quinn? Probably not. Who is. But this is a very, very promising player. Let's make no bones about that.
Yeah, he is. And, again, I think the Canucks actually get better in the here and now, as I said. But you look, no one's going to be Quinn Hughes. Quinn Hughes is a 9.8 out of 10 kind of player.
Yep.
But you'd like to dream about the possibility of getting an 8.8 out of 10 player. And is Ziv Buham going to be that? Is Marco Rossi going to be that? Is that first round pick going to be that? I don't know. Mm-hmm. I'm not terribly convinced of that.
Yeah. Let's direct everybody. We have a poll question out. Sekeres and Price on X. It may well be on YouTube already. Mike's been a very busy boy. How do you feel about the return on Quinn Hughes? Like, dislike, still processing. You can go to @Sekeres and Price there. Jeff, you and I had the discussion about when this goes down. I had even been skeptical that it was going to go down by the deadline because I just figured this owner would have so much trouble coming to grips with the fallout of trading a player like this. Is it fair to say that it comes down here Friday, December 12th, this early on in the season and this early on after all the reports started about the Canucks talking to teams? That just on the surface to me, Jeff, looks like their socks were knocked off by this offer. That's the only reason you do it in the here and now with, 25 plus home games left and having to sell those to your marketplace. Your thoughts on the timing?
Well, I think I come at it from the other side. And I mentioned earlier that the Minnesota Wild are in a battle with Colorado and Dallas. Those 3 teams are pretty certain to finish 1, 2, 3 in the Central Division. They may finish 1, 2, 3 in the West. One of those teams isn't even going to get home ice advantage in the opening round of the playoffs in this current format. If you're the Minnesota Wild, you make this deal now, you get Quinn Hughes for 50 games that could easily help you vault up the standings and catch Dallas. I don't know if anybody's catching Colorado, but having home ice advantage could be massive in terms of getting out of the first round in that ultra competitive division. So I think from Minnesota's standpoint, and we haven't heard from Bill Guerin, but I have to imagine that played into it to some degree, that if you let Dallas and Colorado pull away from you, even if you think you're a good team, and they've got a lot going for them, again, star power of Kirill Kaprizov and Quinn Hughes, and then you throw in a lot of other nice pieces there.
But they're weak at center now, Jeff. Like, they've just peeled the center. They weren't exactly deep on center iceman to begin with.
They haven't had him for a month, and they haven't skipped a beat here. And so, I come back to this idea again. The Canucks aren't going to win the Stanley Cup this year, and this trade isn't done to win the Stanley Cup next year. But Elias Pettersson and Marco Rossi, both relatively slight at the center ice position when you think of true Stanley Cup contenders having like a big dog that you've got to contend with. Now, the hope was that Elias Pettersson would be that guy, and maybe magically he becomes that guy again. I start to wonder, though, about the teardown now. The word is out there. They've used rebuild. Like, how quickly does Kiefer Sherwood get moved? other parts here around this Vancouver Canucks team. And so while they inject some youth and some pieces here, now that you started, hey, don't stop. You've got other players to shop here. And if you're in a tradie mood on a Friday night, hey, maybe Jim Rutherford's not done just yet. So I have to sort of wait for the dust to settle here. And to your point, Matt, about 4 first-rounders, and you're not wrong, and Patrick Allvin tried to spin the Bo Horvat deal. Remember, he said 3 first-rounders because Anthony Beauvillier had been a first-rounder.
Yeah, but Beauvillier was already filled out. Like, everybody knew he wasn't first-round value.
Those were his words.
All 3 of these guys could still play to the first-round value, Jeff. That's the thing. They're young enough.
Or not, right? And I'm not here to dump on any of them yet, but Ogrren's got some real work to do. Yes, he was taken in the first round.
Yep,
and
he
so
does.
We'll see. But,
so break the tie for me, Jeff. I'm like, Blake is dislike. Are you like, dislike? You still processing?
I mean, there's a bunch of different ways to come at it. I suppose I was a little surprised at the volume of return. So I think on that front, they did reasonably well. I wasn't blown away. And I guess, a superstar out, you're hoping that you somehow get one.
You're never getting a superstar back, though.
I understand that. But I'll say that you hope then that Ziv Buham becomes the equivalent of a Nick Suzuki, who was a mid-first round pick that Montreal got from Vegas for Max Pacioretty. And yeah, good player, right? But nobody knew what the top end. This guy has turned out to be a legit stud in the National Hockey League. And so you're hoping that Ziv Buham can sort of follow different position, but that trajectory.
Oh, I mean, sure. I mean, he was 12th overall, and people felt like he fell. Like, most people thought this was a top 10 pick, and that Minnesota and our old friend Judd Brackett, their director of amateur scouting, once held the same title with Vancouver, that this was absolute larceny in the 2024 draft for Buham. By the way, interesting story on Buham. This is a young man. The family's Israeli. He moved to California, and he was born in San Diego. The family is Israeli. So this is a California kid. I'm sure Thatcher Demko has probably reached out to him already. This is a kid, and his brother's also a hockey player, who doesn't have your prototypical background, to say the least. He's 19 years old, Jim. He just turned 20 years old a few days ago. He already has 14 points in 31 games this season. Rossi's at 13 and 17, so there are no flies on their counting stats, even if there are flies on
and they're younger
Ogrren's
players still that have a lot of development left.
Lots of upside here, guys.
And
lots of upside. And it's supposed to be a pretty good draft in 2026.
Rossi just turned 24 in September. So
that's right.
He is a newly turned 24. If people are, we use 25 as sort of a benchmark in the NHL. Well, he just turned 24.
Let me drink from the Kool-Aid for a second here too, guys. The defense core going forward, Philip Roenick is young enough and newly re-signed enough that I'll put Philip Roenick into the group here. Buham and Roenick, Elias Pettersson, Tom Willander, maybe still Mancini, maybe still Kudrayatsev, we'll see. But there's good young pieces there on the blue line. And allow yourself to dream that in maybe a year's time, guys, but certainly in 2 years' time, maybe you're flipping one of the top 2 centers that people consider lightweight and are concerned about that in Pettersson and Rossi. Maybe one of those guys is a winger. Because if Braden Coots can be a Bo Horvat kind of guy, Bull in a China shop, a little more aggressive, can he be a stiffer spine center than Pettersson and Rossi? Maybe Coots is the second line center in a year or two, probably 2. And you can find a different spot in the top 6 for the likes of Pettersson and/or Rossi with Ratu as your third line center, and then a journeyman as your fourth line center. You've got the ability to spin this where you don't need Rossi and Pettersson necessarily as centermen in a year or two's time.
Yeah, Jeff, we know you got to run. You got to cover the Patrick Allvin Zoom here in a couple of minutes, but just leave us on that note, how you feel in the near term, immediate term, about a 1-2 center combination of Elias Pettersson, Marco Rossi. We talked a lot about this in the summer because you're pretty small there. If people don't know, Rossi's 5'9", 175. We know Elias isn't the biggest hombre Tell me how you feel about the 1-2 center depth right now and what it could look like going forward, Jeff.
Yeah, as I said, I've got concerns there, not in the regular season, but you run into Leon Draisaitl, Jack Eichel, Leo Carlson, the way he's developing, Macklin Celebrini, the legit stars, like they don't measure up. Now, maybe Elias Pettersson can get back to some semblance of where he was, but I think 30 games in, we all recognize that it's been tough sledding and circumstances certainly have played into that. So, Rossi helps. I mean, they're better at center with Marco Rossi in the lineup than with this collection of guys that aren't even centers that are playing the position for the Vancouver Canucks. So, I am excited to see that. And I do think he's a guy that will help now and can grow with this group. I'm not as bullish on the Canucks prospect pool as some. Sawyer Mineo was a name that didn't get mentioned there, but he's one of the bright spots down in Abbotsford, and there haven't been nearly enough of those. But it looks like Victor Mancini has certainly been passed here. That's not to write him off, but saw him briefly, and then we haven't seen him again in the NHL level. Jonathan Lekkerimäki, he's supposed to be a goal scorer. I need to see him scoring at a much higher volume than he has scored in either the NHL or the AHL. I know he's young, but Brock Besser scored 29 as a rookie. Like, that's what a goal scorer does, and Jonathan Lekkerimäki hasn't come anywhere close to anything like that. So, and even DPD, there's now some questions. He's kind of stalled a little bit here and come out of the lineup lately, giving him time to grow. I like him when he's on his game, but, I think most teams feel that they've got a lot of those sorts of pieces. So, it's not like the cavalry is coming and just waiting in the wings down in Abbotsford. There's a lot of work still to be done. But, hey, they've stripped it down here. Quinn Hughes no longer plays for the Vancouver Canucks, and now it's all about starting a new era of Vancouver Canucks hockey, and they need these three guys plus the draft pick to turn into parts that will be contributors for a long time to help this hockey club finally get where it's never been in 55 years of existence.
Indeed. Marvelous stuff, Jeff. Thank you for this. You've got a Zoom to cover with the general manager, Patrick Alvin. Appreciate this. You're in for Blake on Monday's edition of Sekeres and Price, where we'll have more coverage. And, of course, everyone should be watching Rink-Wide Vancouver with JPAT following the 9:30 a.m. start in New Jersey on Sunday. Thanks, Jeff. And, boy, does that game not take on a whole different complexion with no Hughes Bowl anymore, Blake. In a moment here, we're going to welcome in our new colleague, Dan Riccio, the Off the Roster pod, of course, formerly of Sportsnet 650. But first, let me tell you about the Toyota Prius plug-in hybrid. It is a no-compromise approach to electric vehicles that offers the best of both worlds. You drive 72 kilometers on the battery alone. You get home, you plug it in, regular plug, no charger needed. And if you need to, you seamlessly transition to the gas mode on this vehicle, giving you 962 kilometers. No sacrifices when it comes to horsepower. Blake has told you many, many times about the beautiful lines on this car. It looks like a sports car on the profile, loaded with tech that's easy to use, a clean, navigable dash. You can lease the 2026 Prius plug-in hybrid SE from $109 weekly at 3.99% APR, 64 months with $3,300 down. Visit shoptoyota.ca or visit your local Pacific Toyota dealer today.
Matt, I want to get to a few things here before we get to Dan here. First of all, some brass tacks here. 6 teams apparently made formal offers to the Vancouver Canucks. They were percolating on a bunch of them. The Wild, in the Canucks' view, apparently blew the Canucks' socks off and made this deal. Rutherford telling the media, Farhan Lalji, that he got indication about a year and a half ago, a feeling that it was unlikely Quinn was going to sign here long term. And then this summer, he was told more definitively that he's not going to. But that means that under a year after he was named captain, Rutherford was already pretty sure the player was leaving, which is something. And he's already begun to walk back the rebuild. Jim Rutherford telling Dan Murphy that he doesn't believe the Canucks have to go full-blown rebuild.
Okay.
But they will trade more players. They will trade more players for draft capital per Murph. not looking to trade their first-round picks unless, all caps, for a really good young player. So,
well, what that says to me, Blake, is that they're going to load up on some draft and prospect capital here, and we will be paying attention. I was going to say draft floor, but are we back to a draft floor again? I forget. The draft has been so weird. It tells me that the Vancouver Canucks are going shopping with some of this capital in the offseason, looking to make trades, looking to add players. Let's hope they stick at the very least to those U25 players that they talked about. They're not in the business of adding these late 20s, early 30s players with the hopes that somehow, some way they can just magically manufacture a Stanley Cup contender in the short term. But I got to say, like, I figured there would be right now pieces because we cover this team and we know that there is a insatiable appetite from ownership to win in the regular season and make the playoffs. I did not for the life of me think they would get 3 current National Hockey League players, all young, all with upside, and a first-round pick unprotected on it to boot. Did you think that was a possibility in trade construction, Blake, to get those sorts of... I thought one would be a prospect, right? Like in junior in the AHL, something like that.
Well, Liam Ogrren has split his time this year. He is a half and half player.
Fair enough.
So he might be the quote-unquote prospect. But they're all, hey, as we just chronicled, I mean, if this trade is done a few weeks back, Marco Rossi is the oldest player at 23. Even still, the oldest player is 24, a recently turned 20-year-old. By those metrics, that all sounds great. And as I said, I think my take on this trade and this season will be a hell of a lot different if I know the Vancouver Canucks have a top 5 draft pick in this coming NHL draft. I'm just not convinced now that they will.
Yeah, well, of course, right now they would hold the best lottery odds, being the worst team in the National Hockey League. Okay, as promised, here he is, Dan Riccio, one of the hosts of the Off the Roster podcast here on the Nation Network. Spent 8 years in Vancouver on terrestrial radio covering the Vancouver Canucks. It's just recently, in the last couple of weeks, made the move over to Off the Roster in the Nation Network. Dan, thanks for being available on short notice here, my man. Appreciate that. What do you think of the trade?
Yeah, I think this is a tough day for Canucks fans. I think we all can agree there. One of the best players in franchise history, maybe arguably the best player in franchise history, forced to be traded a year and a half out from his contract expiring because the team just hasn't put a good enough team around him. They haven't supported him with enough talent. And in the moments that they did, it was built on a house of cards, as we saw. They had the one big push in the Pacific Division winning year, and they get to the second round. But that offseason, things start going haywire. Zadorov leaves despite being offered pretty much the same money that he was offered out in Boston. Lindholm leaves as well. And the Miller-Pettersson beef pops back up again once we get to training camp there. And it's just... everything that could go wrong did go wrong for this team to lead to this point here today. And for anybody, and maybe this is just me, but it kind of feels like Jim Rutherford is pinning this on Quinn Hughes a little bit, saying that, we've known for a while that it was unlikely he was going to re-sign with us. And I get that, but whose fault is that? That's your fault. You had to build the team that he saw a future with, that he saw a Stanley Cup contender with. And there's no, think of how many Canucks fans don't believe in this roster right now. If you're Quinn Hughes and you want to win a cup, or you have aspirations of winning a cup, the way the Canucks are constructed currently around him, that's just not a possibility. It doesn't live in reality.
There is no question, Dan, that this organization, from ownership to the management group, bears responsibility for its abject failures of not building a better team around him, not to mention some of the other play. I mean, we're not too far removed from Pettersson, Miller, Horvat down the middle with a Vezina finalist goaltender. There is no question about that. I would hear your mouth and agree wholeheartedly if this was just a run-of-the-mill superstar. But he's got 2 brothers who are on the same team. I do think that changes the equation here. Blake, you're old enough to remember, and 20 months older than me, might I add. Happy birthday, partner. When Rob and Scott Niedermayer were hell-bent on playing with each other, no matter who it was, where it was, Rob and Scott Niedermayer, when they had the opportunity to play together in free agency, were going to make that so. And I just get the sense that that has long been the case for the Hughes brothers, and that when they got the strike of good luck that Luke wound up being drafted to Jack's team, that at that very moment the die was cast, Quinn Hughes would be in New Jersey.
I think it was a very high bar to clear. Like, even being just a playoff team, like, I'm telling you, if the Canucks are the top wild card team right now, I don't think much is changing. I think the same, agenda is it. Like, I think they need to be legitimately vying for a Stanley Cup right now for Quinn Hughes to entertain, and vying for a Stanley Cup, guys, not in the same way as 2 years ago. Vying for a Stanley Cup in a way that is tangibly obvious to everybody that looks at it, that this team is going to be back there every year. Like, nobody entered this season going, geez, I wonder if the Hurricanes are going to be okay this year. Geez, I wonder if the Avs are going to be okay. Like, it was obvious. They are a good team. And without that obviousness, I don't know that there was ever changing this plot line here for Quinn Hughes leaving this team.
It's true. It's true to an extent. And I like the New Jersey thing. I think there's a reason Rutherford brought it up at last year's end of season news conference, right? He wanted to put it on everybody's radar that maybe it's a possibility that Quinn Hughes isn't here forever. And even the representation of, Quinn Hughes sort of hinting that he's not going to stay in Vancouver. I think it's the way I understood it was, Rutherford wanted some kind of an answer, and Quinn Hughes basically said, I can't give you one right now, but if you're really pressing me on it, I'm leaning no. And that's it. It's not like a direct, I'm not re-signing in Vancouver. It's if I had to answer today, which technically I don't because it's not July 1st, 2026, my answer would probably be leaning towards a no. And I think about all the years of Quinn Hughes' career that have led to this point. He's an incredible rookie, leads that team to a playoff spot. Obviously, it was the COVID shortened year. The next year, sophomore slump, but it's that crazy, crazy North Division year. The ownership turns off the taps, and gone is Chris Tanev. Gone is Chris Tanev, like his early career mentor and D partner, by the way, who he absolutely adored and wanted to stay in Vancouver. Same with Tyler Toffoli and Jacob Markstrom. That whole team changes around, and that season is a complete disaster. They stick around with Jim Benning and Travis Green. Another season starts in turmoil and is a complete disaster until Bruce Boudreau takes over. I mean, this guy has just gone through all kinds of craziness throughout his entire career. And it's season after season where it's a new storyline of disaster around the franchise outside of the one Pacific Division winning year where everything went right for the club. If you're Quinn Hughes, you're like, man, I can go play with my brothers. I can go play a lot of different places that are going to be a lot less quiet, and I can just focus on hockey compared to what it's been here in Vancouver.
Hey, Dan, were you at all surprised at the timing that this comes down on December 12th, 30 games in prior to the roster deadline, roster freeze, roster freeze? And are you at all surprised at the construction of the return here? 3 guys in the NHL right now and a first-round pick.
Yeah, I think the timing is, Jim Rutherford, when he gets it in his head that he wants to do something, that he needs to do something, he's going to do it. And I think we've seen that in Van the last couple of years since he's taken over the team. So he got it in his head that this needed to happen now, and it got done. He felt this was the best time to get a deal done. Maybe there's more noise that filters through, and their leverage as an organization continues to lessen as time goes on. I don't necessarily agree with it. I don't know if the equation changes too much if you wait this out. If you wait it out a little bit longer, maybe Detroit feels a little bit more comfortable in their playoff spot and they're willing to give up a little bit more or something to that effect. But the reason I am curious about this deal, they did about as well as they could do, I guess, because you're just never going to make up for losing Quinn Hughes in a trade. But they can sell it as, hey, we got 4 first-round picks, right? Marco Rossi was a top 10 pick. I think. Yeah, they did. Like, facts only. They got 4 first rounders, right? Buham was a first round pick. I think he was 12th overall, and Ogrren was drafted shortly after. Jonathan Lekkerimäki was, and of course Marco Rossi was a top 10 first round pick as well. Plus, you get the 26th first from Minnesota. So you get 4 first rounders. That's an easy sell to your ownership group. That's an easy sell to a lot of casual fans. But the pathway for this deal to look good for the Canucks is simply Ziv Buham has to really replace a lot of what Quinn Hughes brought to this team. And he's got a ton of offensive ability, but that's a huge ask. And we know in this market, like, there's going to be high expectations for him to lead to the fan base.
So let me ask you the poll question, Dan. How do you feel about it? You like, you dislike, you still processing? Where do you land on this?
Yeah, I dislike it. I dislike that. And it's mostly just that the organization finds himself in this spot where they've got to trade Quinn Hughes. The return, like I said, it was always going to be underwhelming, but I dislike that this has turned out the way that it did. You think about McDavid, the noise in Edmonton didn't pick up until the end of summer, and he was 2 months into being eligible to sign a contract. Austin Matthews with the Maple Leafs has gone deep into pending unrestricted free agent seasons before signing with the Leafs. And for the Canucks and for Quinn Hughes, I mean, the heat started more than 2 years out from him becoming a free agent. So it just speaks to how poorly this whole situation and how poorly this build around Quinn Hughes has been handled.
I hear you. Look, I think you have to separate the emotion and the sadness, if you will, and the failure of having to trade Quinn Hughes from the actual return itself, particularly if we can take Jim Rutherford for his word that he knew some time ago that Quinn Hughes wasn't here. In terms of the Edmonton comparison, I hear you there as well. But, of course, in Canada, you got Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, or the big city hockey markets with coverage that's akin, as you well know, Dan. The others are Pleasantville and handle their players
the Oilers went to
way.
back-to-back Stanley Cup finals. So
well, there's that too. I mean, like, they are a cup contender, my man. Final thought, we'll let you go. Thank you for joining here on short notice, buddy.
Thanks a lot, fellas. All the best. Take care.
It's Dan Riccio, everybody, of Off the Roster Pod here. New show on the Nation Network. We invite you to check it out, particularly if you follow the Raptors or Blue Jays or anything like that. Dan is going back to his hometown of Toronto to do that show, still here in Vancouver. In a couple of moments, or maybe in a moment here, Mike Rogerson, we will bring Jeff Merrick onto the program. Jeff's going to join me. Blake, I know you've got to run because, we have disrupted your vacation, and I don't want to get further on the bad side of Mrs. Price. So tell me, final thought or two here, Blake, on what is a historic day for the Vancouver Canucks franchise.
Well, I think, like a lot of things the Vancouver Canucks have done over the course of, certainly 10, 12, 15, and maybe even all 50 years, is there's a lot of hope here. That's the biggest risk for me, is there's still a lot of hope mixed up into this. Buham is a National Hockey League player, no question about it. Marco Rossi is a National Hockey League player, there's no doubt about it. But in exchange for the best player in Canucks history, is that okay? And I appreciate what the management is going to say about this, that they were backed into a corner of sorts, and this was beyond their control. But the immediate was beyond their control, not the whole thing, as we've talked about. And it's just, it's unfortunate. I'm gonna miss watching him. Even he hasn't been productive. For sure. He hasn't been productive recently, but he's still been really fun to watch. He's been off lately. I think they said that this wild thing really started about a week ago. I almost wonder if he knew Matt. Not because he looked like he was dogging it.
Oh, I think he completely heard the noise and was wholly distracted by all of this, Blake.
Yes.
In fact, I think that's part of the reason why this deal was made now, that they realize we're not getting the best out of Quinn Hughes while this is going on. Oh, my God, if he gets hurt, how that affects our plans. Not to mention Adam Foote's playing him 30 frickin' minutes a night, right? Because they're so terrible. He needs to play him that much. I think that was going to affect his Olympic, how much gas he had in the tank when he went to the Olympics for Team USA in February. So I think this checks a lot of boxes. And I got to say, partner, you and I have done thousands of shows, literally, as well as many emergency show and dissected many emergency trades. I don't typically find myself in this role, but Blake Price, dare to dream with me for a second, okay?
Okay, we're putting on the dreaming shoes.
Okay. This is a bona fide second-line center in the National Hockey League who creates and can score some goals, works his tail off, plays bigger than his size. This is a bona fide NHL power play quarterback who slid to number 12 in the draft, not too far off where Quinn's draft position was, and frankly probably should have gone higher, who is going to play top 4 minutes with you, be a trigger man, move the puck, transport, create offense, make others better. This is a third-line crash and bang winger with a pretty good shot who's going to give you very good minutes and help you score some goals, which, needless to say, has been in short order without killing you on the defensive end. And we're going to add a first-round pick and a player profile that, let's hope, is somewhere in that realm, right? Middle six forward, second pair defenseman, something like that. Those are 4 significant pieces to a team that needed a whole lot. I realize this is a volume trade where they've given up quality, and some people will see it as that and no more, particularly if they don't know the names, Zeev Buham, Liam Ogrren, and Marco Rossi. But there is a possibility that, Blake, even if you only hit on 2 of the 3 players right now, you still have a couple of significant pieces with the first-round pick to come.
You've made the case. You've made the same case I have. Here. Because, Matt, you're talking, hey, they plugged all these holes. You know what's missing? A player with that special potential.
No question. No question. But you were never getting the special Who in their right now mind thought they were getting a special player back for Quinn Hughes? Teams don't trade special players for special players. Very few. I mean, Weber for Subban, we don't see those trades, Blake. You knew that trade wasn't happening here.
Which is why, as I said, if I knew right now they're picking second, third, fourth in this year's draft, I'd be a lot calmer and cooler about it. Yeah, the worry is
I hear you.
They missed the potential for that special player by getting better right now. They are better right now.
I hear you. The good news is Gavin McKenna has some company there. Some view it now as a group of 4 or 5 or 6 players at the top of the draft, albeit not a ton of centermen. Blake, thank you for joining us on vacation here, buddy. I really appreciate you pulling away for whatever you were doing, wherever you were. We'll let you go off into the night. Enjoy your birthday weekend. That's Blake
Thanks,
Price.
everybody. Look forward to talking to you about this.
Yeah, Blake will be back on the regular edition of Sekeres and Price on Wednesday. Thank you to him for joining. Should tell you, it's a presentation of Yellow Dog. We're on sale right now. The High Five Hazy IPA, 473 ml 4-packs on special for the month of December. Look for it on sale at private and government liquor stores. Well, I need company, and some of the best company I know of in the hockey talk world is our dear friend Jeff Merrick of The Sheet, daily here on the Nation Network at 10 a.m.
We don't have Jeff yet.
Oh, I thought Jeff is logged in there. It says to me on my screen that he's logged in. Anyways, we will pick up with Jeff in a second. Mike, thank you for this. Please do tell me when he is ready to go. Okay, let's recap here for a moment, everybody. Quinn Hughes has been traded from the Vancouver Canucks to the Minnesota Wild. Now, I did not see a single insider or anybody connecting the Canucks and the Minnesota Wild other than people just saying, hey, Bill Guerin is a bit of a maverick. He's aggressive. He's in on big players. We had talked about how he made a huge trade last year around this time for David Jiricek, a first-round defenseman of the Columbus Blue Jackets, gave up number of picks in that deal, so he is not afraid. And, of course, he is a mentee of Jim Rutherford. He learned at the hip of the Canucks 76-year-old president of hockey operations when the two of them were with the Pittsburgh Penguins, so there was a history between the two gentlemen making these trades, making this trade. The Vancouver Canucks have acquired center Marco Rossi, a 24-year-old Austrian selected in the first round. He's 5'9", 175 pounds, a left shot center with 2 more years of control after this one at $5 million. I should say he's an RFA after that. So there is a ton of player control here left for the Vancouver Canucks on Marco Rossi. He was the 9th pick in the 2020 National Hockey League entry draft. They have acquired left shot defenseman Zeev Buham. He was the 12th pick in the draft, and as I mentioned with Blake, many thought he was the steal of the first round in 2024, that he slid to number 12. Just 20 years old, just turned 20 earlier this week. 6 foot, 183, 1 more year at $966,000 and club control thereafter. He is cheap, as is Liam Ogrren, 22 next month, a 6 foot, 187 pound left winger who's playing at $886,000, and there is a ton of club control on this player as well. So all 3 of them first round picks, a 2026 unprotected Minnesota Wild first round pick as well as part of this deal. And they are moving, and unless I have missed something, Quinn Hughes and the entirety of his $7.9 million salary for this year, 7.85 if you want to get technical, for this year and beyond, to the Minnesota Wild. We're awaiting Jeff Merrick still. We will get to Jeff in a moment. So for the Vancouver Canucks, and I mentioned that I had reached out to a few scouts on these players. I talked to an amateur scout who was not that high on Ogrren, not that high on Buham, and so he did not like the trade from a Canucks perspective. I talked to a professional scout who thought that Marco Rossi was more of a 2B center, thought that he created secondary offense, but he wasn't at the level of, say, a Ryan Kessler or a Bo Horvat, 2 quintessential second-line centers who are damn near first-line centers that Canucks fans would remember. My pro scout did quite like Zeev Buham a lot, thought he was absolutely a power play quarterback, an offensive defenseman who would transport the puck, create for others, score some goals himself, thought he was a second-pair guy because of the defensive side of the puck, and thought Liam Ogrren was a third-line guy at the top end, thought he had to work on his hockey sense, doesn't recognize the play all that well, but thought that he could overcome some of that by playing with a little more power, playing inside the dots, and shooting the puck a little more frequently than he has in his NHL career to date, and he is still very nascent in his NHL career. We should say this is a young man who was the 19th overall pick in the 2022 draft, played at the famed Djurgårdens program in Sweden. He stayed in Sweden after his draft year, played 1 more year there where he had 12 goals and 19 points in just 26 games in the Swedish Elite League. In the best Swedish, they don't call it the Elite League anymore, in the top division of Swedish hockey. So that is very representative for a teenager. He then came over to North America. He has played some in the American Hockey League with the Iowa Wild, the farm team of the Minnesota Wild. In fact, he has played 53 games there and has registered 42 points. So he is nearly a point a game at the AHL level. Zeros across the board in 18 NHL games this year. You wonder if that made the Wild sour on him a little bit and include him in this deal. He was 5 points in 24 NHL games the year before, 2 points in 4 games in a toe dip the year before that. So it's 7 points in 46 NHL games. He is a player under project, under construction here, still a project. A left winger, 21 years old and 6 foot, 187 pounds, and people think with some growth potential there. Do we have Mr. Merrick yet, Mike? I believe we've got Jeff Merrick about to come into the show.
We do not have any audio or video from Jeff Merrick yet.
Disappointing. Okay, so invite you to get to the Sekeres and Price X and Mike YouTube channels. Perhaps you have our poll question up on YouTube. The question today, this evening, how do you feel about the return on Quinn Hughes? Like, dislike, still processing. You can vote at Sekeres and Price on X And you too. Mike, you're a lifelong Canucks fan. I would love your thoughts here.
Oh, I don't think you want my thoughts here. I don't necessarily subscribe to the best player in the trade wins the deal. But I mean, you have a franchise organizational player going one way and a guy who was on the fourth line. I know we all wanted Rossi as hopefully our second or third line center earlier in the season. But now we're talking about that as the player in exchange for Quinn Hughes, and that's a whole other ballgame to me.
Yeah, so. And I hear you. And yes, many Canucks fans would be very familiar with the name Marco Rossi. We discussed him all summer long. If you don't know the story there, the Minnesota Wild went to the playoffs last year. Their head coach did not have a lot of time for Marco Rossi in the playoffs. In fact, he got demoted down to the fourth line from the second line. There were questions about his size, 5'9", 175, but he does play bigger, and not being a great quote-unquote playoff player. Rossi was quite disappointed with that, went back to Europe, said he wanted to think about some things. The Minnesota Wild spent all summer shopping him, taking calls on Marco Rossi. At one point, they told teams that they required a center iceman back for Rossi. Then they changed their mind, or at least modified, and said, we want a forward back for Marco Rossi. And just this week, we found out via some good reporting from Michael Russo of The Athletic, who does a bang-up job covering the Minnesota Wild, that the Canucks offered Atu Ratu their first-round pick, which was 15th overall, and used to select Seattle Thunderbirds centerman Braden Coots, who began the season with the Vancouver Canucks, and Artur Shilovs, who, of course, they traded anyways to the Pittsburgh Penguins, and were going to have to trade because he was waiver eligible, and they did not believe they could get him to Abbotsford without a waiver claim, knowing they were going to keep Thatcher Demko and Kevin Lankinen if healthy. So it was a three-piece deal that the Canucks offered, that the Minnesota Wild asked for from the Vancouver Canucks. And the Vancouver Canucks turned that deal down, despite Jim Rutherford saying, we've got to go out and get a center this summer. It's going to be expensive, but it would be more expensive not to. And as we have been saying,
I think I found us a second line center.
Yeah. As we have been saying for some time, we have entered more expensive not to some time ago with the Canucks 11-17-3. And the single worst team in the National Hockey League. Here's Jeff Merrick from the Sheet, staying up late, Eastern time. He just had to get on in. Jeff, we had you on the regular Sekeres and Price show today, and we discussed all this, and we said, it's a huge marketplace, and there may be teams that we haven't even discussed all that much in on Quinn Hughes. Your initial thoughts, my friend, on this deal?
Massive. I mean, whenever you trade someone like Quinn Hughes, whenever you trade a superstar caliber player, it's tough to quote unquote win the trade. You just try to minimize as much damage as possible. To me, the whole thing from Vancouver's point of view hinges on Ziv Buham. I mean, Liam Ogrren is a really nice left winger. Probably a second line winger. I mean, considering he has played previously with Jonathan Lekkerimäki, maybe you can help jumpstart Lekkerimäki. Back at that draft in 2022, the three players that the Vancouver Canucks coveted and all kind of had around the same area was Philip Bistad, Jonathan Lekkerimäki, and Liam Ogrren, and they prioritized the guy that can shoot, can really fire the puck in Jonathan Lekkerimäki, and that was considered a deal that he was down that low for the Vancouver Canucks at that point. Just heard you talking about Marco Rossi a couple of seconds ago. Vancouver's wanted Marco Rossi for a long time. This goes back a while. The Marco Rossi talk goes back to, 2021, 2022. It's been a long time that the Vancouver Canucks have had a good look at Marco Rossi and said he will fit here. We want him here. But again, he's a second line center. Ogrren probably trending to a middle six left winger. The whole thing is going to hinge on how good Ziv Buham is going to do with the Vancouver Canucks. That to me is the whole deal right there. Again, you're not going to quote unquote win a Quinn Hughes trade. You're going to give yourself the best chance to try to reduce the damage here. And make no mistake about it. Like, this was probably of all the offers. We're all trying to think, like, okay, what would Detroit have offered? It would be like, I'm sure Vancouver would have wanted Casper, but Edvinsson would be there. Nate Danielson would be in that one as well. We know that Washington didn't want to part with someone like Ryan Leonard, probably weren't too thrilled with parting with Alexi Protas. This was probably, at this time right now, the best deal that Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin could make.
And Jeff, it's funny you name check Detroit, because what's the equivalency there? It's probably Edvinsson, Casper, Danielson, and a first-round pick, right?
And a first-round pick. Yeah, I don't think they wanted to do I can't see Detroit doing Casper as well.
Yeah, despite his struggles this year.
That would be a tough one.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
And look, I completely understand your point in terms of, I'm not taking this position because I'm the best defenseman the Canucks have ever had after Quinn Hughes. I'm taking this position because I do genuinely believe it, and that is the old axiom of the best player in the trade wins the trade. To me, is wholly outdated in a salary cap world where you're putting together a jigsaw puzzle, have X number of dollars to work with, and have your 18 skaters and 2 goaltenders to fill out. The other reason I'm saying this is because we had talked about, and with you, that the most comparable trade to Quinn Hughes being available was probably the Ottawa Senators trading Erik Karlsson a number of years ago. And you can even argue he was more of a diminished accent because he had a significant ankle injury, if I'm not mistaken, at the time of that trade. Well, that trade goes down, and the whole hockey world said, oh, my God, what a fleecing for the San Jose Sharks. And then you look down several years later and you go, holy cow, the Ottawa Senators got Tim Stützle, Josh Norris, Chris Tierney, that's 1, 2, 3 centers, and a second pair defenseman in Dylan DeMello. The Ottawa Senators did pretty well in that Erik Karlsson trade. And so I do wonder, with the passage of time, if this trade is going to look kinder and kinder on Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin.
That's why I keep coming back to the whole thing hinges on Zeev Buham. And I'm not sure, like, I would be very curious, if you inject Bill Guerin with truth serum here, or maybe some more from Jim Rutherford. I really wonder at what point the Minnesota Wild included Zeev Buham in this deal, right? Like, was it one of the first pieces that got Vancouver's interest? Was it the last piece that pushed this one over the finish line? Because to me, the whole thing is going to hinge here. Like, right away, when you're, like, I'm just trying to think, like, you're Bill Guerin, you're talking to Jim Rutherford. What is it, about a week ago when all these discussions with Minnesota started? I'm pretty sure. This is a guess, but it would feel to me like Zeev Buham would not be your opening offer. You would get there. You would try as much as you can, someone like Zeev Buham. But again, was it the last piece that got this over the hump? Was it all of a sudden Bill Guerin looking around the landscape, and it's not just Detroit and New Jersey, it's also, Carolina's in this mix, and a lot of other teams are in the mix as well, and finally you relent and say, all right, we have to have Zeev. If we're going to get the player, we need to have Zeev Buham in this deal. That to me is one of the questions. Like, how did all of this come together? But the whole thing, again, like Maddie, the whole thing is, I'm with you on this. Like, in a salary cap universe, this isn't like, the Lindros deal and Peter Forsberg, etc. It is different, and these are two teams that are in different places in their winning cycle. But the whole thing is Zeev Buham. That is this deal for Vancouver.
So,
the
Jeff,
pieces are nice. Zeev Buham could be a star.
Yeah. Jeff, you covered the 2024 NHL entry draft. I would like to get your 2 cents on the type of players Buham is, if you can fill Canucks fans in on that. And then I remember watching your coverage and others that he was the guy who was falling, right? Like, oh, my God, can't believe he's available at number 12. Every team says it. We couldn't believe he was available. But in this case, they were actually telling the truth on Buham.
100%. Like, I really thought that Zeev Buham, and this was like the big shock of that draft, Beckett Seneca goes 3rd overall to the Anaheim Ducks. I was convinced that Pat Verbeek was going to take Buham at 3. Like, this kid is a tremendous skater, amazing vision, has a motor on him that Vancouver Canucks fans are going to love. He is a special defenseman. Like, Minnesota was looking at this and looking at their first pair and saying, like, man, we've got Zeev Buham and Brock Faber here for the next 10 years, and we're going to have a top blue line in the NHL. I cannot speak enough about how highly I think of Zeev Buham. This guy's going to be an level defenseman for a lot of years. Is he going to be Quinn Hughes? No.
Yeah,
But
well, who is, right?
It's
a small list in the history of the league.
Yeah. If he is, it's a tape measure home run for the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah.
Because they've filled other holes and they've picked up a first round pick as well that they can either use or they can peddle. But Buham, like, Vancouver Canucks fans are going to really like Zeev Buham, and there's a lot of reasons to like Zeev Buham. And the first thing you got to notice is the skating. This is the engine for me for Zeev Buham. I thought he was going as high as 3, and I was not in the minority on that one. That one was a stunner for all of us. And the only thing that I think a lot of us could think of was, is it the size? I mean, he's not walking in here as a 6'5", going to cross-check you in front of the net kind of guy.
Yep.
He's a puck mover, moves his feet, really fast player.
Yeah, he's 6 foot, 185 pounds. Also talked about, this is a really interesting background for a hockey player. He is the
California.
son. Well, beyond that, Jeff, he is the son of 2 Israelis who moved to San Diego. And I mean, San Diego would be strange enough on its own, but Israel to San Diego. And here's the other thing. His mother was a professional basketball player who, when her playing career ended, she moved into the front office and became a general manager. So he's got sports in his background, and he's got sports leadership in his background and his family with his mother.
One more note on mom, because Zeev Buham talks about his mother all the time, and for good reason. So he, you're right, living in San Diego, he played his youth hockey in Los Angeles. And that drive every day from San Diego to Los Angeles was made by mom.
In choked traffic, right, Jeff? Like you were inching along on these California freeways, leaving 4 hours before a practice.
You hate everything about it. And mom is, as we say at the Bell Center, la première étoile, the first star. Never a complaint, nothing. Got in the car and drove every single day so this guy could play youth hockey in Los Angeles.
The other thing I want to add here, this was a kid who made his National Hockey League debut in the Stanley Cup playoffs, Jeff. We know that's a rare animal. We know but we know you have to be a certain level player if they're going to drop you in to a Stanley Cup playoff round. Ogrren, what can you tell us about Liam Ogrren here? Who's the other? Because Rossi we sort of know, but give me your 2 cents on Liam Ogrren.
Liam Ogren's not a superstar. Liam Ogren's not going to step into a first-line left-wing spot, but Liam Ogren's going to be a really sort of middle six guy. He probably plateaus as second-line left winger with the Vancouver Canucks. I don't think you're getting 50 goals out of Liam Ogrren. Really serviceable, really smart player, like a really heady kind of guy. And again, the thing that I do wonder about here is, and this is where it can really hit with Vancouver. And again, we're going back to like 2021, playing a couple of years in Djurgården with Jonathan Lekkerimäki. If this can help get Lekkerimäki going, if that chemistry, because those two really were a story together. If that can get Lekkerimäki going as well, that is an unofficial, it's not as part of the trade, an unofficial benefit of this Quinn Hughes deal. You might have done a really solid for another first-round draft pick. They had him high. You know, like I said, like it was him, Bstad, and Lekkerimäki. They all had right in that zone where they ended up taking Lekkerimäki.
That is great stuff, Jeff. Thank you for your insights on that, your evaluations on these players. Really appreciate you being available to us late at night here. You got a final thought? You got a final thought?
I do have a thought. I do have a question. Because, you know, Jim Rutherford, you know, talking about how we kind of had like Rutherford's been around for a long time, and like his intuition is really, really good. And he's saying, like, you know, a year and a half ago, you had the gut feeling that Quinn Hughes wasn't going to resign. Like if it got to that point, maybe you have a thought on this one, but I'm still a little bit scrambling on it after hearing this here. Why the Connor Garland deal and why the Thatcher Demko deal?
Oh, and Jeff, don't get me started because I was a critic of both of those deals, saying you had time, you chose not to use it, and particularly with Thatcher Demko, given his injury history, and particularly after you had re-signed Kevin Lankinen. Like when I saw the Lankinen extension last year, I thought it was in the vein of, great, they're going to secure the goal next year with two terrific goaltenders, and then they're going to bid farewell to Thatcher Demko, whether it's at the trade deadline if they're out of the playoffs or in free agency. Lankinen, you'll have a $4.5 million goaltender. You bring a young goaltender up, or maybe you have a stopgap goaltender. I think what's at play here is that's a really easy thing to say at this stage of the game. If you're Jim Rutherford, it's a very convenient thing. It's a very rationalizing thing to say. I don't disbelieve it, though. I believe it's true. I believe Quinn Hughes had experienced enough of the dysfunction of Canucks sports entertainment long ago. This is a unique franchise. It operates very differently than a lot of other franchises. At its best, it tries to be a mom-and-pop operation where everybody knows everyone from the owner on down.
Yeah.
At its worst, it's the owner getting involved in the lives of these players as well as in the hockey managing. And I think Quinn Hughes looked around, and you know his father, who is a very hard and unrelenting man, and thought, oh, okay, we have two guys who are playing in an organization that is ascending and on the upswing. Dad knows how a number of other organizations work around the National Hockey League. The Canucks are irregular. The Canucks are dysfunctional. The Canucks have not had a lot of success. Let's get our boy out of Vancouver. I can wholeheartedly believe and see that being the case, and Rutherford knowing of this for some time.
For sure. And the other part of this too, like we think about the New Jersey Devils through all of this situation right now, and a couple of things come to mind. July 1st, Quinn Hughes can sign an 8-year contract extension with the Minnesota Wild. The other thing that I think, Matty, I think I've been consistent with you. I've been consistent with you on your program all season long that I'm not so sure that at the end of the day it's a New Jersey Devils. I mean, the allure of playing with your brothers is one thing, but at the same time, it's not just playing with your brothers. It's also, if you're Quinn Hughes, you walk into New Jersey, you just took your brother's spot.
That's it. Luke's playing power play one.
It's like,
and Minnesota has an
opportunity. Sorry, Luke.
Yeah. And Minnesota has an opportunity now, Jeff, to make Quinn fall in love with them and sign him to that 8-year max extension before this September. If you're not familiar with what Jeff's talking about, there have been changes to the CBA. The current rules are in place till September 15th, which means you can sign an Indigenous free agent to an 8-year deal. Another team can only go as much as 7, but on September 16th, that changes to 7 years maximum to sign an Indigenous free agent. 6 years if you're poaching. And so there was the difference of 2 potential years here for Quinn in New Jersey, and leaving a lot of money on the table.
There's one other major factor, too, that players just of Quinn Hughes' ilk love. It's your last shot at really striking it rich with the front-loaded deal and the bonuses.
That is the other thing, and that is an exceptional point, Mr. Merrick. Yep.
And you talked about his father, Jim, who just, look at that, just happens to work for CAA, one of the wisest.
I never got the sense his father liked it here, Jeff. I had heard some stories around town, Quinn blowing off an appearance, in fact, blowing it off 2 separate occasions, leaving a lot of people waiting here. I had gotten, somebody told me recently they were sick of Francesco. I'm not sure Jim Hughes ever took to this market or to this team. And frankly, given the way it's been run, I don't blame him. So I think this day had been coming for a while. Oftentimes, I think when you make a trade like this and trade a popular player, the best defenseman in franchise history, one of the greatest players in franchise history, managers and presidents will say a lot of things to keep themselves off the hook. In this case, when Rutherford says he had known for some time that Quinn was probably leaning of signing somewhere else, I believe that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Excellent points. What are we
Okay,
going to
buddy.
talk about next week on the show with you?
Yeah, no, I know. We're like fresh out of topics here.
This
Get
is-
your
this is-
Kiefer Sherwood hot takes ready, okay? I need you to do some digging. Find out where
let's
Kiefer
go.
Sherwood is headed. They
Hey,
love
listen,
the Friday afternoon, evening trade dump,
Hey,
Jeff.
dude,
So
I'll tell
just
you
know.
what. I would not be surprised if he ends up with the team that we're talking about right now. To be honest with you,
Really? Pray tell.
can you
Pray
hang on?
tell.
Can you not see Kiefer Sherwood ending up a member of the Minnesota Wild?
I could,
to
but
all
what
of
else do
this?
they have
Like-
to trade?
like-
They just traded
like-
the farm, Jeff.
Well, look, you always look for teams that are comfortable trading with others. Like in a massive deal like this between Bill Guerin, who would know Jim Rutherford going back to the Pittsburgh Penguins deals, there's a level of comfort there already. That's a player that the Minnesota Wild can use, considering that now that Quinn Hughes has entered the Central Division as well. All of a sudden, that division gets even stronger. And you're going to have to go through probably Dallas in the opening round. Colorado. If you're going to do anything here, you're going to have to slay two dragons. I don't think Aaron's done by any stretch of the imagination. And considering, what Kiefer Sherwood can bring in the playoffs here, given the way that he plays, I don't know. If I'm looking around the landscape and looking for a take for Kiefer Sherwood, I'll say, why not the Minnesota Wild?
Yeah.
If they're going to do anything against Dallas and Colorado, they got to muscle up, and they started with Quinn Hughes.
Awesome stuff, Jeff. Thanks for staying up late. I appreciate this.
Thanks,
for
Matty. No
jumping
problem.
on the program. That's Jeff Merrick, everybody.
My
The
pleasure.
Sheet right here on the Nation Network, 10 a.m. Pacific time daily. He joins our program, Sekeres and Price, on Fridays. Now, I'm getting word, Mike Rogerson, and forgive me as I speak to our producer here, is Mike Russo of The Athletic, longtime beat writer for the covering the Minnesota Wild. Is he ready to go?
Not right now, no.
Okay. I'm getting word from one of our so Mike Russo of The Athletic is going to join us here in a moment or two. Mike has been covering the Wild for many, many years and frankly covering the NHL at large, more recently for The Athletic. So we'll get his 2 cents. He will have a great handle on these 3 players and that and of course the mechanics of how all of this came around, because, and look, talked about this on today's edition of Sekeres and Price with JPAT, that we had heard Quinn Hughes connected to a number 9. We counted 9 teams that we heard Quinn Hughes connected to by different reporters and insiders over the last 2 weeks, when the Canucks season was clearly going south and when this became a reality. And I suppose the other thing I'll say here is I did, even till today, see a lot of Canucks fans in denial, thinking this was some sort of media creation, or that the front office just couldn't do it or the owner couldn't bear to do it. I will commend them for their decisiveness and for their urgency on this file. I thought for sure they would kick this can down the road, just like they have kicked so many cans down the road, delaying the difficult decision, paralyzed to make the unpopular decision, and yet here it is, and I think Jim Rutherford is very likely the driving force behind that. I would have paid damn good money to be a fly on the wall to hear Rutherford bringing this to Francesco Aquilini with his recommendation to accept it. But those 9 teams we talked about tied to Quinn Hughes: the New Jersey Devils, Detroit Red Wings, Washington Capitals, Pittsburgh Penguins, Philadelphia Flyers, Carolina Hurricanes, New York Rangers, Utah Mammoth, and Columbus Blue Jackets. And sure enough, it is none of those. It is the Minnesota Wild, who hadn't really been talked about at all, other than just Bill Guerin as an aggressive general manager. And of course, in the vein of the Vancouver Canucks having looked at and pressed on the Marco Rossi file this summer. Stunning. Absolutely stunning here on a Friday, late Friday afternoon Pacific time in Vancouver, that you have a trade of this magnitude. You have what is almost certainly going to be the single biggest trade of the National Hockey League season. And, even missing the component parts of Rantanen for Martin Necas last year between the Carolina Hurricanes and the Colorado Avalanche. Of course, the first trade of Mikko Rantanen before he's moved to Dallas for Logan Stankoven and others. I think you can argue this trade is even bigger than that. Yeah, you may look at it and say Natchez and Rantanen are better players than Marco Rossi. I don't think anyone would dispute that. But I also don't think you can dispute the multiple parts that were involved here, that all of these players are first-round draft picks, and that there is a fourth first-round draft pick that is a party to this. So this will be the biggest trade in the National Hockey League this season. This could be the biggest trade in the National Hockey League for several seasons hereafter and for several seasons before. In fact, this probably goes down on a Shea Weber, PK Subban, Taylor Hall for Adam Larson level deal. And even then, it could be bigger because, let's face it, how often are you trading a top 2, top 3 at worst player at his position? How often are you trading a player of this stature in a marketplace of some 25 teams? He had zero trade protection. How rare is that? So an extraordinary development and an extraordinary deal, and especially, again, with how quickly and decisively the Vancouver Canucks operated. This is not something that I expected from this group. I thought they would have all sorts of trouble coming to grips with the finality of Quinn Hughes' career here in Vancouver. 489 games, including playoffs, so he falls just short of 500 games with the Canucks. We had talked about over his time here what a pleasure he was to watch, how he completely changed the dynamic, how the ice was shifted when Quinn Hughes was on the ice for Vancouver, and we're no longer going to get to see that. He finishes 13th all-time in Vancouver Canucks scoring, 432 points, 12 points better than his former captain and the man he succeeded, Bo Horvat, 5 points shy of JT Miller on the all-time list of Vancouver Canucks scoring. Do we have Russo ready to go now?
We have Mr. Russo.
That's fantastic. Mike Russo, the beat writer par excellence of the Minnesota Wild, covering the Minnesota Wild for The Athletic. We've had him on the program, well, many times in the past. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate the time here tonight.
No problem. How are you?
Yeah, very well, buddy. How are you?
Good.
You got your finger on everything Guerin and the Wild do. How surprised were you tonight?
Yeah, surprise, especially since I talked to Billy twice today.
How dare he?
So, yeah, I know that sure makes me look out to lunch. Even worse, I was actually working on an Ellen Hughes feature today, so that even makes me double embarrassed. Very, very surprised. But Bill Guerin has made it extremely clear, could not be clearer that he is going big game hunting this season, and he wants to do it quick. And this was the one big game piece on the market right now. I think all of us thought that he had his eyes on players like Tage Thompson and things like that, and maybe that still could be the case eventually, although this might have been the package to go into that. But Quinn Hughes, to get the second best defenseman in the NHL in my mind, in his prime at 26 years old, a Norris Trophy winner, and put him in a Wild lineup with Kirill Kaprizov and Brock Faber and Jesper Valsted and Matt Boldy, who is a star. I think that is something, one, he hopes convinces Quinn to sign here. Two, elevates them on par or gets them closer to Dallas and Colorado. And three, lures other players to Minnesota because they still need a center, even more so now that they traded Rossi. I get why he did it. These players don't grow on trees. So I actually think it's a win-win for both. I think that Vancouver was put in a position that they knew he wasn't going to extend, and they had to get the best possible package out there, and they wanted to do it quickly. And to get the equivalent of 4 first-round picks here, essentially, with Rossi, Buham, who could eventually become a Quinn Hughes type, and Ogrren, I think it's absolutely worth the gamble by Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin.
These are still early hours, Mike, but how is the trade being received by Minnesota Wild fans?
I'll be honest, I have not looked at Twitter. So
Okay.
it's either good or bad or in a mix, and knowing with Wild fans, they're panicking. I've conditioned Wild fans to panic over the years, so I'm sure they're a little worried. Um,
Well, then let me ask you this. Let me ask you this.
Yeah,
Don't worry about it, Mike. I don't want to. I don't
Yeah.
want to ask you questions you don't know the answer to. Again, this is we're all freewheeling here. Nobody expected to spend their Friday night doing this. I'm
Yeah.
sure. Let me ask you about the component parts here of this deal that are coming back to Vancouver. Mike, can you explain why the Minnesota Wild seems so eager to trade Marco Rossi?
I think Billy it's the undersized nature of him. It's the belief probably that he doesn't have maybe the wheels to eventually be that true number one center. But I'm telling you, Vancouver is getting a gem of a guy, a gem of a player. He might be undersized, but just go on to NHL Edge or any analytics and see where he scores his goals from. He's got balls of steel. He goes into the tough areas. He is incredibly great hands. He's got to work on his face-offs. His conditioning is excellent. And he's got incredible leadership standpoints. This is a kid that, overcame a heart ailment here in Minnesota, and really set him back a year. And I just think that the world of the kid. And I do think that right now the Vancouver Canucks, from an immediacy standpoint at center, they're definitely better.
The heart ailment, Mike, is there anything lingering there? Is he completely in the clear? What can you tell us about his health going forward?
Yeah, he is supposed to be sorry, I'm getting distracted by other texts. Yeah, this has not been an issue at all. I definitely think that at the very, very beginning. Yeah, I think definitely at the very beginning. And I am very, very tight with his family and him. He was just scared. And so when he first came back to the NHL, I think he was scared to exert himself. I mean, he had an ailment that if the Wild doctors did not catch, could have killed him. And so, he has been 100%. This was during the pandemic. So after he captained Austria in the World Juniors in Alberta. And so that was a long time ago. And he's just been an excellent player the last couple of years. Up until this injury that currently has him out of the lineup, Matt, he has played all 82 games the last 2 years. As I mentioned, he plays through anything. This one, he just finally had to come out. He had a broken bone in his foot. He's practiced the last couple of days. He was supposed to play Sunday. So he'll be, trust me, I talked to him tonight. He is excited to get to Vancouver, and I think he's going to, be ready to debut right when they want to put him in the lineup.
A non-drinker, a devout Christian, he and his girlfriend pray before games, and he's a fan of the Red Bull racing team from his native Austria in Formula One.
I actually, I'll tweet it out for Canucks fans, but I actually went to his hometown a couple of years ago. He was my Uber driver throughout his hometown, and I wrote a really cool feature on him, so I'll throw that out there.
We'd love to see it. For many, Mike, the prize here for the Canucks is not actually Rossi, the already formed second-line center and 60-point guy in the NHL, but Zeev Buham, the 12th overall pick, and I've been stressing here on this emergency pod, he fell to the 12th overall pick. There were a ton of people who thought he was a surefire top 10. What can you tell us about Zeev Buham?
Another great kid, one of the best skaters that I've ever covered, and he is going to be a fabulous offensive defenseman. What I've loved about him the last really month is that he's just gotten better and better and better as a teenager. In fact, he's 20 or he's about to turn 20. He's just gotten better defensively in his own zone. He is undersized, not undersized, but he's got to get bigger, and he put on a lot of muscle. But, I'm tight with John Blum, who plays in the KHL and used to play in the National Hockey League, and he worked out with him all summer, and he just
former Vancouver Giant captain John Blum, Mike. Go. Yeah.
And John told me all summer, you won't believe how hard this kid works in the room. So, he's the goal for him, and I think it very well could happen, is that the Wild just get, a Quinn Hughes that's 3 years more advanced, 6 years more advanced, but you know what I mean from an NHL standpoint. And, that the Buham could eventually get there. But I think that what this shows you, Matt, is that Bill Guerin's in absolute win now mode, right? The fans here have been dealing with the Parise and Suter buyout situation for a long time. And he is not willing to wait for Zeev Buham to become Quinn Hughes. He's not willing to risk that Marco Rossi is the number one center that he doesn't think he could become. So that's why they made the trade.
Oh my goodness. You don't make a move like this unless you're in win now mode. This is a massive swing from Bill Guerin. Mike, in terms of Buham on the defensive side, like we always said here in Vancouver, Quinn's turned into a very good defensive player because he has the puck on his stick for 4+ minutes a night and he just doesn't give it away. So he's not playing defense often. What can you tell? Everybody loves Buham's skating and offensive ability. Where do you think he fits as a defensive defenseman, and is he going to have to be sheltered?
It's going to happen for him. It's not there yet. That's the thing. What I think needs to mature in his game actually is the offensive component of his game. He doesn't want to seem to, right now, probably because of his age and not wanting to make mistakes that are going to hurt the team, have the puck on his stick a lot. It seems sometimes frantic with it, wants to get it rid of it. We saw it actually in the game in Vancouver last week. There was one play in the second period, if you remember, second period might have been the first or third. Okay, there we go, because I know which way. Where he skated on the power play right through the entire Canucks defense on the penalty kill, gets between the circles, cuts to the inside, and then either loses the puck or gave it away in that situation, does not unleash it. So it seems like that's the area that's going to mature, and it's going to happen for him. I've seen it before. I mean, there's going to come a point where he's now going to realize, you know what, I'm good enough to actually make the play here and not give it to Kirill to make the play, not give it to Zuccarello to make the play. And so I think that is just going to continue to come with great coaching, and we've seen it at every level, whether it's internationally for the United States and college at DU. This is going to be a great, great defenseman.
Mike, I hate to break your heart. I watch most Canucks games, but last Saturday I was engaged in your former hometown there of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, watching that Vancouver Whitecaps Inter-Miami soccer championship soccer match. So I missed it. I'm sure our listeners and our viewers watched it. Lastly, Mike, and I know you're busy, I appreciate the time here. Liam Ogrren, and I think the first thing that's going to jump out for Canucks fans is, what do you mean he's played 18 games and doesn't have a point this year? Talk to me about Liam Ogrren.
Yeah, here's another kid that if you go to his social media, you'll see his dad's a professional trainer in Sweden, has worked with NHLers for years, guys like Jesper Brad and Rickard Rakell and Landeskog, and so he's built like a machine. I think he's a little in his head too much. I think he's always thinking about what the coaches want, and it's really paralyzed him at times offensively. I actually thought his game in Vancouver last week was one of the better games that we've seen. And coincidentally, the reason why I was really paying attention to him is I know the Wild offered him for Sherwood. And so, I just thought that maybe they might showcase him a little, and I was curious to see how he played in front of Rutherford and Alvin. And, I just, the one thing, he has an NHL shot. I think the one area that he's got to improve is just foot speed. He doesn't seem to be able to really have that extra gear. He's gotten better physically. As I mentioned, he's built like a machine. He's got the NHL shot. I think he could he could be a good middle six winner. The kid is another great kid. I mean, I can tell you the one thing the Canucks just got, and we know the history in the last couple of years of the turmoil inside that locker room. The Canucks locker room just got three great, great guys today.
Standing, Mike, just one quickly. Are they still in on Kiefer Sherwood after giving up all these assets?
I don't know. I think that if they wanted Sherwood, they could probably be like, hey, if you want this deal done, throw him in. Yeah. I mean, look, Kiefer Sherwood is a Bill Guerin type player, but the fact that it didn't happen today, my guess is it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, you would know it better than me, buddy, and Kirill Kaprizov is a hell of a hockey player. Do not get me wrong, but I think there's an argument that the single greatest NHL player to play for the Minnesota Wild has arrived today. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, Kirill is obviously blessed, and I think Boldy is well on his way. But, I mean, the Wild have never – and they've had some good defensemen. They've never had anybody like this. And so, 2 years removed from a Norris, those guys don't just grow on trees. And you get them at 26 years old. I think the Wild feel like they have an excellent chance to re-sign him. I'm hearing more and more that he probably doesn't want to go to Jersey because of what the role it might put Luke in. And so, we know the history that Bill Guerin has with Quinn, with Team USA. I just think that, and then with the CBA change, I think the Wild have all the advantages to re-sign him.
Yeah. When you first saw it, were you knee-jerk, that's too much, or wow, what a get at that price?
I got the scoop All right. So yeah, I won't. Somebody called me and said that the Wild just traded these three guys, and honestly, I was making calls, and I knew it either had to be for Quinn or Elias, and I thought it had to be Quinn, just knowing Bill Guerin and the way that, just even talking to him today and just knowing how much he's looking out there, and so. Did I think it's too much? I guess I didn't know about the first at first, and just
and that's an unprotected first, Mike. That's an unprotected first. Yeah.
Yep. And so, and the other thing is, like they have no assurances that he's going to resign here. That has not been discussed yet with his camp, and I'm sure it'll happen quickly. But you don't want another Mikko Rantanen type of situation. So at first, yeah, I was a little shocked when I got the call. And it took me about 15 minutes to finally confirm and put it out there. But it was a frantic 15 minutes of my hand shaking, knowing that they just gave away these three players and not being able to confirm. And I can tell you that was nerve-wracking.
One of the bigger trades you'll ever cover, and you've covered a number of them.
I covered, let's see, a Pavel Bure, Brett Hedican.
I remember you in Florida all those years ago. Yeah.
There were like 8 or 10 components to that trade.
At Russo, Russo Hockey, you can follow him, who does sensational work in Minnesota, and he's promised he's going to tweet some things out for Canucks fans here. Mike, we look forward to this. Can't thank you enough, brother, on a Friday night to come on. I appreciate this.
Yep. Say hi to me all.
Yeah, sure will. That is Mike Russo of The Athletic in the Twin Cities, who has covered the Wild for an awfully long time and covered the Panthers before that, where he welcomed Pavel Bure to town. So there you go. Wherever Russo goes, big Vancouver Canucks trades happen. That is going to conclude this emergency edition of Sekeres and Price for Friday, December 12th, 2025. I would like to invite everybody to our watch party, our Christmas party with Canucks Army. That's coming up on December 20th, a week from Saturday, at Greta Bar YVR 50 West Cordova. It's free to get in. Wear an ugly Christmas sweater. We're going to have some fun. We'll have discounts on certain beers and on house shots, as well as $3.33 off select menu items. 50 West Cordova, Greta Bar. Let the games begin. My thanks to producer Mike Rogerson, hitting switches and conducting things over the last 90 minutes. Short notice for Mike as well. The Lionsgate Bridge on a Friday night. That's not easy to navigate, brother. Appreciate that. Also, thank you to Dan Riccio, Jeff Patterson, and of course, Blake Price. And we'll talk to you on Sekeres and Price on Monday.